About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side, the real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired, out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up, and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass, behind some bushes, to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and then fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock. 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rear view mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at the time, I thought it was the hook killer. You know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a car parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me. I noped out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story? Don't sleep on the side of a deserted road. I'm 23 now, and this happened about 10 years ago, so I was probably 13 or 14. Anyway, I used to skateboard all the time with my friends Tim and Brandon. One day, we got done skating, and we decided to go to 7-Eleven to get some food, drinks, before we went home. Remember, I was only 13 or 14, so we weren't driving. We had skated to the 7-Eleven and were planning on skating, walking back home. Anyway, we bought our drinks and we left the store. We walked to the parking lot's exit and prepared to cross the highway. It's not a bus highway since it's a small town. While we waited for the traffic light to turn red so that we could cross, I looked behind me at the 7-Eleven gas pumps. I noticed a 40 to 50-year-old man pumping gas into his white truck. He stared at me, and before I knew it, he dropped the gas pump and jumped into his truck. He slammed on the gas and sped straight at my friends. He missed us, but he grazed my arm and knocked my skateboard out of my hand. My friend, Brandon, screamed as the man peeled out and sped into the parking lot next to 7-Eleven. I swear to God, he drove through a ditch and tried to run us over again. This is where it got bad. The three of us started running at full speed across the highway and toward the local library, which is like 2 to 3 blocks from 7-Eleven. When we were about 1/2 a block away, I looked back and saw the maniac speeding toward us, full of rage. Brandon and Tim ran up to the library doors and I ran towards the woods. Meanwhile, this maniac peeled into the parking lot and hopped out of his truck. I looked behind me and saw him grab either a shotgun or a crowbar. I was pretty far away at this point, and I was freaking out, so my vision wasn't great. I ran all the way home. When I got to my street, my neighbor, Tim's dad, told me to get in his car because we had to go to the video store, which is where Tim's mom worked. When I got there, I found Tim and Brandon. They ran to the video store after realizing that the library was closed. A minute later, my mom came in, crying her eyes out because Brandon and Tim told her they didn't know if I lived or not. Everyone had thought that I was captured. Tim told me that he saw the guy running after me, into the woods, which is scary because I thought the maniac was chasing them, not me. Anyway, he was never caught, and I spent the next 5 years worrying about every white truck I saw. A few years ago, there was a small plane accident that occurred in a neighboring town. I was part of the county volunteer search and rescue group, and when we got the call, I was one of the responders to help try and see if there was any chance of a survivor from the crash. We found out from the sheriff that it was an elderly couple and their young granddaughter that were in this plane. Immediately, it went dead silent. You could see the life drain from the other responders' faces as soon as it was said. Upon getting to the area that the crash happened at, it was clear that there would be no survivors from this accident. It wouldn't have a happy ending. There would be no joyful and tear-filled reunion. This plane was absolutely destroyed. Our lead turned to the group and said if anybody was uncomfortable or not willing to do the recovery of the bodies, there would be no hard feelings or anything held against them. Some people just aren't cut out for this. About half of the group said they couldn't do it. They helped set up the rappelling lines, made some radio calls to other teams that were lower on the hillside, helping us navigate through the broken trees and aircraft parts to get to where we expected to find the bodies. I'll never forget the feeling of complete, utter numbness I experienced that day. The first thing any of us saw was this small stuffed teddy bear and the blood that had soaked onto it. When we finally were able to get down to the bodies, we had to stop and collect ourselves. It was heartbreaking to see this little girl with such empty, devoid eyes. She was gone, never to grow up and experience life like most of us had, never to know the joys, aches, frustrations, sadness, excitement, and everything else life throws at you. I've seen a lot in my few years as an EMT. I've seen drug overdoses, diabetic shock, car crashes, suicides of all manners. But this messed me up for a while. Nobody should have to go through what we went through to help bring closure for the family. When I was in high school, I had a really good friend who lived next door to a house that was always up for sale. People would move out in the middle of the night without a word, and it hadn't had the same owner for more than 6 months straight for a couple of years. One night we were really bored, and he suggested we go explore the house next door since it had sat empty for a while. We go around back, and there's a dog door that he can crawl through, and he unlocks the door and lets me in. The house itself is really unremarkable. It looked like it was built in maybe the 1950s and was a craftsman-style house in an older, nicer part of town. My friend's house was similarly built. The kitchen had a really nice built-in breakfast table set against a picture window. The house's electricity was off, but you could see the street light through the window. My friend and I sit down on the floor across from this table and are just hanging out, talking. Why? Who knows? All of a sudden my friend screams, and in that instant my vision goes black. But it wasn't that I just couldn't see. My body was engulfed in this sickly coldness from head to toe. I start screaming and I feel my friend's hand grabbing mine and pulling me in some direction forcefully. My vision slowly comes back and I start to warm up when I realize that we're outside under the streetlight. It was December and should have been much warmer inside of that house. Finally, I look at my friend and he looks scared. I'm really confused and kind of panicked, and finally asked him what happened. He says that as I was talking, a black thing. This figure that was all black and only had the vague shape of a girl crawled out from under the table and sat on top of me. Apparently, I started groping around with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so freaked out he pulled me out of the house. We're still friends and we bring it up every now and then, but the story itself never changes and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I've never felt such blackness or coldness in my life. It was palpable, almost sticky. For a couple of days afterward, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling, and I could never walk past that house again. Ugh, I'm scared to get out of bed now.